I think I grew up with the technology, so I became a reporter in 1986, the People Power Revolt in the Philippines, and then I remember the magic of the fax in 1987, from typewriters and payphones to computers to digital news gathering with CNN to hourly live shots, satellite. I went through it. You know, I was a traditional television broadcaster, and then after almost 20 years with CNN, I decided to go home. Home is the Philippines. I headed the largest news group in the Philippines, ABS-CBN, and handled about 1,000 journalists, a change management to try to shift it, right? Shift it to, and it wasn't really digital, it was to make it more professional, standards and ethics. And then in 2005, after 6 years of trying to work with ABS-CBN, I realized that number one, the things that made traditional media successful in the past are not the things that will make it successful in the future. As managers of news groups, what we did in the past was to make things more efficient, right? So if you have 5 reporters, you get them on a workflow and you make sure that workflow is followed, you make it efficient. Well, being efficient isn't enough in the new world, and that change is difficult for traditional newsroom managers to realize. The very things that made you successful in the old world are the very things that will hamper your progress in the new world. In this new world, let's just take the operating system, right? In CNN, it would take minimum 5 years to change. We went from Basis to Avid. 5 years, and we were on Avid for years and years and years. In Rappler, we change the operating system every 6 months. You know, so the technology is changing so fast that you're gonna have to assess the environment, and you have to build that kind of experimentation into everything that you do. You know, it was something that I figured if it didn't work, we'd try it for a year and then we'd move on, right? After 6 years with ABS-CBN, I realized that we couldn't try digital well, because the traditional news groups, primetime news, which gets the lion's share of revenue, will get the lion's share of talent and resources. Very hard to get that in digital, and yet digital needs that top talent and resources in order to grow. So in 2005, in 2010, I left ABS-CBN and I wrote a book, and then while I was writing that book, I realized that it's about social networks, which led directly to social media, because the book was about terrorists' use of social media, right? The title of my book was From Bin Laden to Facebook, and looking at that, looking at how terrorism grew exponentially, also gave me an idea of how how news groups should be using social media. And in 2012, at the end of 2011, I got some of my old managers from ABS and I. There were 4 of us who were in our 40s, and then we hired the smartest 20-somethings we could find, because we just did not grow up in this age, you know. And somehow, with the first 12 people, we muddled through. We just said, you know, we're gonna have to find new tools, new ways of doing things. We're gonna keep the standards of ethics of journalism, but we're going to find new ways of getting everything to people's pockets. And if you can get it in their pockets, we will be ahead of the curve. We started it in 2012. We caught the rise of social media as it was cresting, and that pushed, you know, my gosh, our growth went from 100 to 300% in the first 3 years. And it wasn't until our 4th or 5th year where we ran into the dangers of social media. But what is it? The biggest challenge in the first 6 months was letting go of everything you thought you knew. I was really privileged to be working with such, you know, good friends and also people who believed the same thing. We had lived through the martial law, coming out of martial law. We had the values, but yet we knew that we didn't know anything and that we had to learn. So throwing out old ways, every time I would think of something to do, like I would figure out, okay, we have to do this, but my way of thinking always cost money. I came from CNN, I came from, you know, so it always cost money. Our 20-somethings, you tell them, I want to go here, and they'll find a free way to do it, and they'll do it faster than we would, the older ones. So 4 or 5 of us above 40, everyone else was 20-something. It helped that, we were a combination of veterans, old and new. I always, it's the fact that I'd been around for a while in the Philippines helped in terms of credibility. Our first the 4 founders all wrote books against corruption in different ways. We had experience, but we also threw away that experience to explore this new ground, and it was really exciting. And the whole idea is, and again, this is, I think, we go back to what is the purpose of journalism? What is the mission of journalism? We realized we could use technology for development. And the bigger purpose, we tell stories. The stories are what we feed our communities, but the end goal is to build communities of action. Our country has weak institutions, endemic corruption, very young population. 23 is the median age of 100 million people. So what we were hoping to do is, if we can use technology to pump prime development with journalism as the food we feed these millennial communities. It worked. The change theory worked, and in 2016, actually, you could see social media. That was really the first time a candidate used social media to win the presidency. And then, unfortunately, shortly after that, we also saw social media become weaponized for propaganda purposes. And now we have a whole different environment. But I'm still really excited about the potential for development. That's the end goal. You go back to what is this technological development, right? It's all about the chip, Moore's law. The amount of information on a chip doubles every 18 months. We do information. If that chip doubles every 18 months, think about the amount of information that a consumer is inundated with, and how do they process that? If you think about it like that, the role of news groups fundamentally must change. And so this is it's a wonderful experiment, and I still learning, and sometimes super frustrated, sometimes super elated, but highs and lows, you go with it. You change because there's tools that are lighter, faster. I can put it in, this one is much better photos than the old one. Video, audio. I can't even, from when I used to be a reporter with this microphone, the microphone now that you have is so much clearer. The kinds of lenses that you would have, the fact that this one is HD quality, software and hardware, it's a fundamental change. And so what we try to do is encourage our folks and us ourselves to constantly keep looking and try to figure out how can we reach our community, how can we empower our community so that we're creating something together. And that's the other part, I think, that's hard for a traditional broadcaster, is that you realize you're not a gatekeeper anymore. Right? The gates have come falling down, and you must embrace your community. And even if you don't, if you really look at it now, the gatekeepers are the tech platforms. And that's something that we're going to have to play and deal with, and the tech platforms are going to have to take some of the responsibilities of the gatekeepers. Oh my gosh, I think it's human nature. When you find something that works, you want it to stay stable for a while. Just because you need to catch your breath. We just don't have that much time. So our ability to, for me, I always tell our team, you sprint. This is like a, what do you call it when you pass the baton? It's a relay race, right? So you run as fast as you can. When you get tired, hand off the baton to someone else. Take a rest, go off, go take a vacation. If you need a vacation, take a vacation. And then someone else run as fast as we can. The good and the bad thing is, even as we're dealing with the negative aspects of social media propaganda machine in our country, it's fire that's forging our team. It's making our mission even clearer to each of us. And so that relay race, you're running full speed because you know what's at stake. Assess what you know, keep a journal. Keep a journal, assess what you know, and then when you begin the journey, you keep the principles at the back of your mind, but you've got to look at everything with fresh eyes and look for the best way possible. And don't expect to find it the first time. You know, the first time may not be right. You're gonna have to throw it away and start again and start again and start again. So what actually works well for us is that when we were just 12, we just said, you know, okay, this is where I want to go, and everyone finds their way there, and the workflow that's the best, we take that. And then we keep that in place. Now again, if it was a traditional news group, you could keep that workflow in place for 5 years. Can't do that anymore. So my job now, actually, which is kind of fun, is I look at all these tools that one person can carry. I carry one bag, and in that bag is everything I need to go live. And same with our reporters. So I'll try out new tools, and if I like it, I'll hand it over. And then our 20-somethings are incredible. They're courageous, creative, and they have lots of hands. They have more than 2 hands, you know. So yeah. I think I started with what's the key thing? You make the choice to learn. I guess part of it is I went into it with an open mind. And I was ready to fail, and if we failed, I would go back to what I used to do, right? Which was be a television broadcast journalist. But when it succeeded, then it was like, oh my gosh, then we have to keep going. And I think, so here's the thing. When you do this, you better be ready for the long haul. It is a marathon that is a sprint, you know, so you sprint, 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 rest in between. And you can't do it alone. You've got to have a great team. Be aware of, I think we need to have that. There's a book that exponential organizations called it the MTP, the Massive Transformative Purpose. The vision of journalism, the mission of journalism, this is most important now in almost all the countries, every country we were dealing with today, right? We're redefining the form of it, but the mission will determine the quality of the societies we live in. I'd always said, even when I was with CNN, that the quality of a democracy is always reflected in the quality of its journalists. In an age where everyone is a journalist, then you've got media literacy, but the journalists have to move up in the value chain. And it's so hard when you're doing 10 million things. I don't know if I really answered you, but you know, yeah, we don't have all the answers. We keep going.